Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners on key business topics and specialist areas. This is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. Our host joining me today is BizSmart founder Kevin Brent. Thank you, Kevin, and over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Mel. Fantastic. So this webinar is around clarifying accountability. So how to clarify accountabilities in your business, and it's about asking questions like, have we got the right people in the business? Are they doing the right things? So I'm going to take a look at a couple of frameworks in this webinar to help work out whether we've got gaps, perhaps in terms of the people that we need and maybe the performance that we're looking for. If we're growing from really small, so it might be that some of us are literally just owner-managers, then these frameworks and this webinar should help you to work out and plan the next steps of your growth. So if you're looking to scale up, it should help you to work out where perhaps you need to start plugging the gaps. Quick reminder about the four pillars of growth that we've had before. If we're trying to scale up our business, we definitely want to be looking at the strategy for the business is the first thing. We want to be looking at whether we've got the right people doing the right things within the business. We want to, and from the execution point of view, so strategy, people, execution, and the cash. This particular webinar is going to focus on the people. Have we got the right people doing the right things in the right way? From the point of view of getting it right, then the many people have said that getting the right people and the right chemistry within your teams is actually more important perhaps than the right idea itself. You know, if you've got really good people, then things will come right if you've got some general direction on it. And Ed Catmull is president of Pixar, and he's fairly famous for saying this. And one of the problems that we have and that we see when we're working with business owners is that quite often there's if you're familiar with DISC and behavioural profiling, a lot of us that start up our own businesses are fairly driven people, got quite a lot of D within us, so we're not necessarily always the best people managers. So it can be a struggle for business owners, and one of the things, a lot of the times we get business owners saying to us that their team, even though they've got good people, they perhaps don't have the same proactive approach to building that business as the business owner themselves, which to some extent is understandable. You wouldn't necessarily expect somebody who doesn't own a business to actually have the same drive and the same drivers, but a well-functioning team that does understand and buy into the vision of the business and then understands their role in making it happen can go a long way to addressing this. But I thought I'd take a quick look at what makes an effective team before we perhaps drive into some of the frameworks that I was talking about before. And when it comes down to it, this is research from Google. Google did their own research, but there's also research from Patrick Lencioni, who's modelled the 5 dysfunctional team. And in both of those, this idea of trust is absolutely key. It's phrased here as psychological safety, but it's all about how comfortable are you in the team to raise questions, even things that you're struggling with. How comfortable are you within a team to actually do that? So that's about trust. Second thing is about dependability. Can you depend on your teammates and hold them accountable? And that links in with number 3, which is all about structure and accountability. Are the goals and roles clearly defined? Then there's this element of personal satisfaction or feeling that you're doing something that's personally important and that you believe the work that you're doing has an impact. If you've got a team that has these 5 things covered, then you're going to have a team that's working really well. And most of us can probably think back to a time in the past where we've had a really good team where it's worked really well. And if you think back to these, you've probably got a lot of these things that you could say, yep, actually that's working. Or equally, if you've ever worked in a dysfunctional team, then you may be able to point to one or two of those things that just weren't working. So trust is really important, but and then some of these other aspects are probably a subject for another webinar. What I'm going to focus on a little bit more in this webinar is the structure and accountability. So are the goals and the roles clearly defined? How big should a team be is also part of it, because the bigger the team gets, then the tougher it is to keep control. And Amazon are fairly famous for talking about this 2 pizza rule. So the size of and what they mean by that is that the size of a team shouldn't be any bigger than can be fed by 2 pizzas, which basically means that the ideal team is somewhere around 8 people. So it might be 4 to 12, but it's somewhere around 8 people, because that's the kind of structure that you can manage. So if your business is bigger than that, then you need to start thinking about how you can divide into teams within your business, so that you're doing that, so that you might break off into teams for particular processes or particular projects, customer offerings, customer segments, whatever it might be, but you might want to divide that team. And this is, although it's not always been known as the pizza rule, it's a fairly well established principle. If you think of the military, if you think of the army, then they typically, the lowest group really is what they would call a section, and that's typically 4 to 12 people. They'll then combine a couple of sections to form a squad and so on. But they've got their tight teams. The RAF call them flights, but they're used to the fact that actually to keep the communication and keep the trust in terms of dependability good within their teams, they need to be fairly small teams. So we're going to look at a couple of frameworks, but let me just tell you a little story first about everybody, anybody, somebody, and nobody, just to set the scene for accountability. So let's call this story "It's Not My Job." There's a story about 4 people named anybody, everybody, and somebody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. And it ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. So that, just a neat little story about accountability. And the principle here really is that if there's more than one person accountable for a job, then it's probably not going to happen. You need to have somebody accountable, but if you've got more than one, it's not going to happen. And here's just a quick breakdown of a difference between accountability, responsibility, and authority, because it quite often gets mixed up. And accountability here, this is not about the decision making. Accountability is much more about the tracking process. So if you think about, I'll tell you what, I'll come to that in a minute, but you can break it down into the ability to count really, but it's about tracking things. But the responsibility then is typically a joint thing within a team about proactively supporting the team. And then authority, of course, is the final decision making and the power. So and the decision making power. So if you think about a task, some of you may have done leadership development exercises, and there's a time set for that. Others of you will be very familiar with BNI, for example, where you've got 60 seconds. So if you think about that 60-second structure, or that you've got a task to do in a certain time, you might well delegate, the leader might delegate the timekeeping to a particular individual. So they're then accountable, that person is accountable for keeping track of the time and telling people when they're over their time or not, or when it's coming towards the end. But the group is jointly responsible about making sure that they help to do stuff and they've got an eye on the time as well. But they're responsible for making sure that things happen within that. And that if it's in the BNI example, that you're responsible for doing your own 60-second and making sure it is roughly about 60 seconds. But the authority comes down to the person leading that team, and it's their decision as to what to do about it. So if somebody is going over their time, it's their role to then or their right, authority to actually overrule and stop. So accountability, and I just want to get that clear before we go into this, is about tracking progress. It's not about the responsibility and authority. They fall to the other members potentially within the team. And as I said, generally, if more than one person is accountable for something, then it probably won't get done, because one will think the other one is doing it. Just going back to the story of somebody and anybody and whatever, somebody will think somebody else is looking after it when it probably isn't. So let's have a look at this framework. So I think we've probably got, yes. Let's just go back to that. So this is a framework to help you work out whether you've got the right people in the right seats. And you'll see what it, on the left-hand side there, it lists the functions that should be probably in every business. I've grouped them according to the 8 key areas that we would normally do. So the finances, the marketing, the sales, operations, the team side of it, the leadership side, and the stability side. Every business will have those. There might be, within your particular business, there might be some other functions or sub-functions that you would want to put in here. But the point is, you list the key functions down the left-hand side. If we're scaling up as well, as I said earlier on at the beginning of this webinar, we might find that the business owner is the person that's accountable for all of these areas, and we want to gradually move people from being accountable. We want to move it from just being us as a business owner, and we want to say, right, well, you know what, the marketing side is the next thing that I'm going to delegate to somebody. I'm either going to outsource that, or I'm going to take somebody on, and these are the key tasks that they would do. So I'm going to take you through step by step how to use this framework, but this first one is just to show you it as a table. So left-hand side, the functions, then we've got who's accountable for that particular function. The next bit is the leading indicators. So what are the key performance indicators that go with that function? And lastly, but by no means least, what are the results and the outcomes? So let's just take you through this step by step. So that's step one. Have a look at those functions. Make sure if you want to add any specific function to the list that you do, and then fill in that first column with who you think is accountable. So if you have a team of people, if you do have a group of senior managers, it's a really good exercise to get them to do this and actually to separately list who they think is responsible, for example, for the marketing, or for let's just say for IT, for information technology. Who's the person responsible within the business for that, accountable within that. So that's a good exercise to do. And then if you look at that and you think about asking yourself then a few questions. So when you've done that, the second step is, do you have more than one person in a box? So if that's the case, we need to think about deciding who it is that actually is accountable within that, which we shouldn't look to have more than one person in each box. Second question, do we have one person perhaps that appears many times and that is in too many boxes? In which case we may need to think about reducing their workload on that. Do you have any blanks? You may have some areas where actually nobody's accountable for. So again, need to think about that. And the last question, I've said, would you enthusiastically rehire? Well, maybe not rehire, but in this case, have we got the right person? Is that person in there somebody that we would say hand on heart, yes, they're the right person in that box, and they're doing what we need within that. So if you do that, so step one, list all the functions, put people in the boxes as you think it is right now, and then ask yourself these questions. So that's the first couple of steps on that. Then we want to look at the leading KPIs for each of these. So we're looking at some key performance indicators, and the thing here is to try and find up to 3. You don't want too many, so any 1, 2 or 3 key performance indicators that go with that function. And ideally, these should be leading KPIs. So you may or may not be familiar with the idea of leading and lagging KPIs. So lagging KPIs are typically, let's just take finances, so that would be the sales that we've done. That is a lagging KPI because it's happened. There's nothing we can do about it once it's happened. We've either got 100 grand's worth of sales for that month, hopefully, or we haven't. A leading KPI is more of a behavioural KPI that we think will lead towards getting the sales that we want. So if we were talking about lead generation, it might be that your lead generation process involves sending out some letters, doing some follow-up calls, having one-to-one meetings, and that might be some of the behaviours that you're looking for. So they could be leading KPIs, the number of phone calls that you've made, the number of phone calls that lead to meetings. So for each of those functions on the left-hand side, you should ideally define 1 to 3 leading KPIs that are kind of the daily and weekly activities that should lead to the desired results that you're looking for within that. So that's another useful exercise to do. And then the final step in this is to try and where we do match it up with the results. Now this is a really good step to do. For smaller businesses, it may feel a little bit overcomplicated, and you may want to just do it in a summary fashion. But the idea here is that we then actually take a recent profit and loss statement, and we look at every single line on that, and we say who's accountable for each of those lines. So and we then match them up within this framework. So you've got a framework then that's looking at the leading KPIs, but it's also then looking at the lagging KPIs here in terms of results and metrics. So it might be the sales line. Who's actually at the end of the day accountable for monitoring the sales and telling us whether we're on target or not? But equally, it could be that a key cost line item, so just pick out the key item from your P&L. So it might be that there's a key cost that so let's just say you outsource to contractors, for example, to do certain things. So that might be a line item that you really want to keep an eye on. So who is accountable in your business for that cost of the subcontractors that you're using? And there might be other costs in there. You might look at the IT, you might look at telecoms, but you don't want to, for a small business, you don't want to get too detailed about it. You just pick out the key things that you know will make an impact on your business. And when you've done that and you've actually aligned that up as well, you can ask yourself those same 4 questions actually that we asked before again. So do we have more than one person that's accountable for any one line item in the P&L? Is any one person responsible for too many things, and are there any missing lines, and are we enthusiastic about that person? So that's that framework. Now, I don't know how straightforward that's come across in the webinar. It is actually a pretty straightforward framework, but the devil's in the detail in a way, or the power of it is also in the detail. It's if you go through that logical step-by-step process of doing that, it's not a quick 5-minute job, and certainly if you've got 2 or 3 people working in your business or more, it's a good group exercise, and it will take a little while to do it, but it will certainly make you and your team aware of all the key things that need to go on in the business, all the important things, and who is accountable for keeping a track on it. Remember, I said that accountability is different perhaps from responsibility and authority, because we're all responsible within the team for making up on the business grow, and this should help people actually understand that we've all got an impact in growing the business. We're not just looking after one little area, but we've all got some responsibility to help grow it. But there are key people that are accountable for reporting back to say, yep, that's where we should be on that. At the end of the day, the authority will fall in a small business, obviously, to the business owner. In a slightly larger business where perhaps we've got teams, where we might have an operations director or we might have a sales and marketing director, then the authority will actually fall back to them, but they won't necessarily be doing the day-to-day measuring of it. So that's, and as I say right back at the beginning, if we are an owner-manager and we're starting out on our journey, we will have our name in all of those boxes. But we might then be able to say, actually, you know what, the first thing I want to do when I can afford to do it with my business is I want to delegate accountability for this particular box, this particular row or function within that framework. And that then means that you can start to plan ahead as to what you're going to need to put in place to be able to successfully delegate that function or that line. And it, as I said, it could be outsourced. It doesn't have to be in-source. It could be, let's just take your marketing lead generation again. Quite often businesses will outsource some of that. So the accountability will be within a third-party company, but there'll be an individual within that you'll want to have the accountability with. So that's fine. And this framework has been used by lots of different businesses, but I was privileged enough to hear Dr. Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, talk just a few weeks ago, and this is one of the things that he mentioned he did when he started his business up from a room above his garage, and it was him in all of these boxes. He basically did this framework. He also drew it out as an organogram, but he did this framework and he basically said, that's the next one that I want to be able to shift off of my plate and in the end put in process to do it. And he counted it as a huge success when he was able to completely delegate, for example, all of the delivery side, the actual packaging and sending out the logistics side of his business. He counted that as one of his first huge successes. So hopefully it will help. But there is one other framework which I'm not going to go through in the same detail, but that actually almost crosses with this, because we've also got key processes within our businesses. So whilst we've got the functional accountability, we've also got the process accountability. So we might have some key processes like I've listed here. They might have billing, for example, as a key process, or perhaps closing sales as one of our key processes. I've just put some examples on this template, but so what we've got here is a slightly different framework where we list the names of the key processes, and we then find a person that's accountable for that, and we then generate a few key performance indicators for this as well. So it could be developing and launching a new product is one of our key processes. So who's responsible, who's accountable within our business for that, and what are their key performance indicators that we want. If we're generating leads or new business, who's the person that's accountable for that within our business. So if you do an exercise here where you just list out a handful of key processes, well, a couple of handfuls, anywhere from 4 to 9 sort of key processes is recommended that drive your business, the things that need to be done on an ongoing basis in your business, and work out who's accountable for it, for one, and then think about the key performance indicators for those processes, because, and this is, we're going to look at these slightly differently from the previous framework, because if you want to improve a process, if you want a process to run really well, then it's all about it being better, faster, or cheaper. So how can we measure the quality of that process that we're doing? How can we make it happen faster and more efficiently if we can? And how can we save money on doing that? And if you set some KPIs around that and you monitor those on a regular basis, then again you've got another tool, another framework. So those are quick look at a couple of key frameworks to help you identify who's accountable for what within your business. Have you got the right people in the right seats, and are they doing the right things? That's really what this has all been about. If you want to have a template of those two frameworks, then by all means send me an email, kevin@bizsmart.co.uk, and I'll send you ours. They are based on a couple of tools that are in a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. So you can also find the original versions of them on their website and in their book. But I certainly recommend that you have a look at and you think about how you can apply these to your business. So I think that's really all I wanted to say for now, Melanie. Thank you. So
okay, thank you, Kevin.
Have we got any questions that have come in?
We have, yeah, we've had a number of questions come through. So from Sam, What KPIs for leadership can you recommend?
Okay, so leadership is one of those 8 sort of areas that we focus on. I think there's a number, and one of the ones that you could argue is actually whether you've got the right the ratio. If you do this framework and you do that functional accountability framework, the ratio of the right seats people you've got in the right places. So if you've got 8 different lines, have you got 7 people that are filled in the right one? So your ratio, that might be one. But there are other things around leadership KPIs. And actually, Sam, if you send me an email afterwards as well, I can send you some generic key performance indicators for those 8 areas. But if we take leadership, then things around clear vision set and communicated, so core values, core purpose, all that sort of type thing. It might be that you've got a metric that you want to do in terms of number of hours worked as the leader of that business. You know, are you going to set a limit on how many hours you want to be working in that business? Are you on track towards the vision and the goals? You might have some personal development goals that you might want to do. And we talked in the last webinar I did about meeting rhythms, and have you got those in place? So there's a number of things, and as I say, as well as, are you on track with your critical numbers for that particular quarter? So, but if you want, I can send you an email with some generic KPIs in there. But good question, thanks, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Another question from Rob. Can you explain more about stability on the functional accountability framework?
Okay, so yes, stability is one that we talk about, particularly specific probably to BizSmart. I think it's a key thing in trying to build a business for value and a long-term sustainable business, is that there is some stability in that business. And it's around things like protection. Have you got all the right protections in place for your business? But also it's things like reliance on key customers. So, for example, the percentage of the sales or the profits that your business relies on from the top 4 key customers. So you don't want to have any one customer representing more than 15% of your sales if you can do it. So you could set some stability KPIs around over-reliance on key customers, over-reliance on key individuals, whether that be staff or whether it be suppliers, for example. There might also be some specific ones around your business about seasonality. So maybe you've got peaks and troughs, and it might be about trying to even those out over the whole year. So looking for things that in your troughs that you could do to even that out. And a key one for us would be the percentage of businesses on kind of a repeat basis, so a recurring revenue. So if you've got a business that is very much hand to mouth, that you get something in, you deliver it, and then you've got to go hunting for the next one, you've always got these peaks and troughs because of that. But if you can find a way to move your business into more of a recurring, even a subscription model is absolutely ideal. Then if in some businesses it's appropriate then to track that percentage of your overall business, and maybe your goal is to get it to 50% of your business is on, say, subscription. Right now it's at 5%, and you might then set yourself some KPIs along those. So hopefully that answers your question well on that.
Okay, thank you. One final question from Susan. You mentioned trust as being fundamental to teams. How do you go about getting to that point?
Okay, so that's the toughest one of all, and I think what we will do now is we'll do another webinar on effective teams probably, and we'll focus on trust within that. Trust is clearly not something that you just click your fingers and you wave your magic wand and you get it. But there are a couple of ways to help start that process, because a lot of trust comes down to our understanding of each other actually quite often. So there are a couple of exercises that you can do from a personal point of view and also a group point of view that might help you to understand your team a little bit more and what their personal objectives and goals are. I don't think I'm going to go into all of them now, but certainly one of the ones that we've used quite successfully in the past as a group is a kind of a vision board exercise where you lay out a load of magazines. It can be all sorts of magazines, whether it be travel magazines, holiday, car magazines, house magazines, whatever they might be, and you get each person to just cut up some pictures from those that mean something to them, stick them on on a board and then explain what that's about. And what you uncover about people then is a lot about what drives them and what they're really interested in, what their long-term goals are. And actually, as a team exercise, that can be a really good one because it's not too invasive into really what are you going to do in 3 years, or what's the thing that's impacted you most in your life, and you're not trying to necessarily get them to share too much real personal, real difficult stuff, but you're getting an insight into where they're trying to head, and that can then be really useful to help get that understanding between each other. And there's other things like personality profiling and stuff which helps to do that as well. But that's probably the starting point on that. But perhaps we'll do a bit more in a future webinar season. I hope that helps for now.
Okay, well, thank you again, Kevin, for hosting today's webinar. We'll be sending out a copy of the presentation and contact details to you very shortly. Before we close, just a quick reminder, this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website, biz-smart.co.uk, and go to the Smart Room page. So we hope you enjoy the rest of your day and hope that you can join us again very soon. Thank you for listening.